the team. First of all, please welcome production designer Hendrix Dyas. Editor Sofia Subercaso. Alba Rohrwacher. Angelina Jolie. And we also have cinematographer Lachman and director Pablo Larraín. Thank you all for staying, and thank you all for the film. I'm going to start by asking Pablo maybe to just go back to what you were talking about in the introduction and your childhood fascination with opera. And I'm wondering at what point did you think about making a film about Maria Callas? And in relation to the other two films, I'm wondering if you even saw it as a trilogy to begin with. Was Maria somebody you were thinking about in relation to Jackie and to Diana?
Well, I guess the first question that I had, it was if it was possible to make a movie like this. And I'm sure there are a lot of moviegoers, cinephiles in here, and there are very few movies about opera. It's so odd. It's just like it's very unusual, and given there's so much interesting material there, so I was curious what was the reason for that. And then, I wanted to conclude this idea of this, three women that kind of shaped the second part of the last century. And I knew that in order to make this movie, we needed someone like Angie. So what we did is that when Spencer was done, before it went out, we hired a cinema in LA and we invited Angie to see it. And she saw it, and then I talked to her and said, "Would you play Maria Callas?" And she was like, "Give me a second." And then I talked to her a couple of days after, and she said, "I'll do it." And then we talked to Steve Knight, and so he wrote the movie for her. So that was the order. And for me, it's really about, what I try to explain at the beginning, it's really about having the chance or the illusion to bring some of the opera world, some of the ideas around opera into the screen. And of course, the biggest thing that I had in mind was to make a movie that would have a central character, Maria Callas, that would become the sum of the tragedies that she played on stage. Maria Callas was very famous for a number of operas, and 90% of them were tragedies. So she was dead on stage for many years when the opera was done, was over. So for me, she got used to the ecstasy of the applause on an opera house while she was dead on stage and the curtains were closed. So she had no fear to death. And somehow the idea of doing this as a sort of tragic moment of her life is also a celebration of her work. And I gotta say that I had a little bit of a different vision of the character. And when Angie came in, she brought something that I immediately accepted, but it was not in my, was this sense of stoicism. So I would say, Angie, can you be more broken here? It's like, no. And what do you mean? It's like, yeah, I think she's stronger than that. I'm like, okay. And then we build this character that even going through the darkest times stays in command. She's never a victim. She's always there to, so I learned that from her.
Angelina, we'd love to hear from your perspective. What do you remember of that initial conversation with Pablo?
Well, he knows I've loved his work for a long time and wanted to work with him for a long time. You know, just her name it's quite overwhelming. I knew of her then. Certainly, I know her more now, but I knew of her then, and I know the way he works. I know how intense and how true his work is, and I knew that when he asked me, he meant that we would deeply, deeply go into her life and what that would require, and I think it was only me spending a few days to be sure I felt I had enough in me to meet that request. And I couldn't have done it with any other director, honestly. And so it then began the 7 months of training. Because I also thought, when he said, you have to sing, I think like Mose, I thought, I'll pretend sing. And I'll do the movie singing and I'll get through this. And then it was very clear to me that you can't pretend opera.
Yeah.
And then I was scared.
Well, let's talk about that, the not pretending thing that you did and the process. You talk about why there's so few opera films, and I think that is probably one reason, the difficulty of pretending to sing opera. So you came up with a solution here, like the two of you.
The thing is that if you, I don't know, just to get in a car and play the Beatles, you could sing it, right? Sing along. Mm-hmm. It's pop music, rock music, you can sing it. You cannot do that with opera. Because you cannot follow the melody, because you're not trained to reach the pitch. It doesn't matter your voice, the color of your voice, or how special it is. It's just you just cannot do it. And the only way to do it is to really, really train. So she had 2 months of training on posture and breathing, and then another month or so in language, so she would pronounce properly the words, mostly in Italian that she sings. And then the rest of it was just really getting into the melody itself, to be able to follow it and match the pitch. Just for you to know how it is, how you do this kind of thing, she has an earpiece in the set, and she is the only person that hears herself and Maria Callas and the music. Everyone else in the set, sometimes we're 200 people, sometimes we're 500 people, would only listen to her voice. Right? So that's very scary. So why we do that? Because we need to capture her sound, her voice, her breathing, everything that she creates sound-wise. And then a very specific team that's been doing this for years would take that voice and mix it with Callas. But the only way that it feels real is that she actually has to sing it out loud, really loud. And I would go to her and say, can you go louder? And I'm like, yeah. And she was sometimes she would go to the extras and say, I'm sorry, I'm not a singer. You know, the guy. So a guy named John Warhorst, who's been doing this for many years, basically finds ways to mix it in. So sometimes it's 1% of Angie, 99 is Callas. Sometimes it's 5%, sometimes it's 50% of Angie, and the other 50. Of course, you can't why would you make a movie about Maria Callas without Maria Callas' voice? That's insane. But the thing is that you would never make it believable without it. And also, the best way for her, and I said that to you, to really approach the character was through her music. So once she was able to properly sing it, she was ready to play it.
Can you talk a little bit, Angelina, about just that process of immersion? I mean, not just in the training and learning to sing in Italian and all of that, but the research, I'm sure, that went into figuring out this character and your decision to play her, as Pablo said, with a certain degree of stoicism.
Well, part of the stoicism came from I always feel I'm always very moved when I see the fight to continue. It is moving to me. When I see someone who's full of self-pity or giving up, it doesn't move me in the same. And I was very moved by her because I would see her, even in her darkest hours, I would see her try to, pull herself together and move forward. And I feel that it was moving, and I feel it's her. And I wanted this to be about what an extraordinary artist she was, as I know you did too, and this is a celebration of her and this artist who is a fighter and a deeply feeling emotional person and someone who loved art and gave her life for it, not someone who was just a tragedy. So that was important. And the process was, he said, just to, for anybody who hasn't sung at the top of your lungs, it's a crazy thing to do, and it's the most important thing. We never do it, right? We never know what it's like to be fully in your body with your fullest sound. Such an extraordinary thing to feel as a person, to know what you got inside of you. And I'm very lucky I had all these teachers and people holding my hand and people supporting me to say, let's hear your full voice. But it really meant a lot to me as a person and helped me and yes, gave me a key into her and to her characters and to her work.
Alba, I wanted to bring you in. I think one interesting thing about the film is how our sense of who Maria is emerges through her interactions with others. And I think in that regard, Bruna is a really important character in the film. I'm wondering if you can talk about how you approached it.
Yeah, because Pablo is really someone that is looking for the truth. As Angelina said, I have not to pretend to flip an omelette, but I took a course to do it. And now, yeah, I did in Milano. He sent me to this big chef, and he taught me how to do it, and now I can do like Shakespeare doing omelette. So that was something. No, I'm joking, but really is looking for the truth in a very special way. He's looking for every details, and so we build, I think, this character in a very beautiful way, looking for the small things of Bruna, how she moves, how she speaks, how she takes care of Angelina. And then for me it was very important meeting Angelina, because then there is the magic that is between people that arrives or not arrive. So, and to me, to understand this kind of unconditional love that Bruna has for Maria, the key was meeting Angelina, because I was immediately there, so I found the truth of Bruna, the truth of the emotion of Bruna, just following her. So yes.
I wanted to bring Ed in, maybe, because this is, I should just learn in the introduction that you guys have known each other since Tony Monero. But you worked together on El Conde last year, for which Ed received an Academy Award nomination. I just wanted, this idea of like continuing to work together. What was this process like? I assume quite different from a very different film, first of all. And I'm wondering if you can talk about your approach to Maria.
Well, the thing about Pablo is all his films are visually different. And so when he told me this idea, the first thing I asked him is, what's the similarity between opera and cinema? He said, there is no difference. And so for me, how do I create a film as an opera? Through the art direction guy, through how Angelina embodied this character, and how Pablo, who also operated the camera, was the first audience. So he had the emotion to respond to this performance that he knew so well through the music. And so for me, it was this heightened reality to create the film that felt naturalistically, but it was beyond naturalism. So it was, for me, it was the subtlety of creating those two worlds, the abstraction and the normalcy of the world that she was trying to live in.
On the subject of creating the world, maybe Guy, you can talk a little bit about this. You've actually brought some materials with you, I think.
Oh yeah, my lucky book.
Maybe you can. Maybe you can show the
in front of me. I don't think half the people sitting here have seen me without this. So this is the sort of the Bible that Pablo and I make of the film. It has absolutely everything in it, from samples of wallpaper to pictures of Maria and everyone else for that matter. So I keep that with me all the time. It's been from the very beginning to right here. So that's quite a journey. But creating the world really for us was two levels. The first is, rather like Angie's journey, it's a lot of research. So we really went to the end of the world for this. We went to Maria's apartment. We went to we literally walked in her footsteps, and that really was the first step, I think, in our process. And then we always seem to do this thing, don't we, Pablo, where the film gets designed once in a very sort of expected way. Everything's where it should be, you know, furniture is correct, places are correct, everything's just as it should be. And then there's sort of a second wave of design that we go through, and that's really when it gets exciting. And that's really all from Pablo. It comes from in his head, and ideas come up. I want an orchestra in the rain, and then you find out that no, nobody wants their instruments in the rain. So, well, go make me some instruments. So then you have to make an entire orchestra's instruments and ask them to pretend to play these things, right? That was incredible. So there's lots of things that when you watch the film, you sort of take a little bit for granted. You think, okay, people playing their instruments in the rain, but there's no way that could ever happen. So that's just one of many, many examples. But it was such a joyous journey, and certainly, you do this job, it's your livelihood, but there are certain projects you do, and it just comes from the soul. And watching this again, it's one of those special projects. I'm so grateful to be a part of it. Thank you.
We don't have a lot of time left, but Sophia, I wanted to bring you into the conversation as well. And you have worked with Pablo before, and I'm wondering if you can talk about just your process of working with this film, which supposedly takes place at the end of her life, but also is quite fluid in terms of how it works with time and flashing back and forward, and how much of that was written and how much of that was something that you worked with in editing.
So the process of editing this movie was surprisingly very, very fast, way faster than we anticipated. And the script had a very, we followed the script a lot, but then there were certain things that we took lots of liberties with. Some of it was just certain pieces of music that existed kind of in isolation, and we played with them throughout the movie. But it was just a very organic, fast process. I was cutting as they were shooting in Budapest, and I always stay very far away from set because also I was in New York and they were in Budapest. But I like to stay very far away and keep my distance so I can see it with really fresh eyes and not just let the footage speak for itself and not be tainted for whatever you think is happening while you're making it, which is something that sometimes happens when you're on set. So by the time Pablo and I sat on together, we already had a rough assembly of the movie, and then I think 6 weeks later the movie was done. It was super fast. Yeah. Right?
Last question, just for maybe you, Pablo and Angelina, can talk about this. What the film does in terms of recreating some of her, Maria's iconic performances, and what went into that process.
I think that there's a word that I just looking at these wonderful people here. and I see them, and there's one word in common. There are many, but one word that's called obsession. All these people is very obsessive. You see Ed Lachman is very kind. You would not believe how he can be in a set. Guy is a man who just does not sleep, just doesn't sleep. Sophia would just not stop. Alba and Angelina, you can imagine how hard they work. And I don't think it's just commitment. I think it's to really believe in something, and I'm so grateful to work with artists that really go for it. In a world where there's so many distractions and I don't know, things are purely entertainment elements. Sometimes you get the chance to work in something that could eventually have meaning and could eventually touch or move other people, and that is the best of the world. So I'm sorry guys, but I think I have the best job in the world. Thank you.
I think that's actually a good place to end. But thank you to all of you for the film, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.